Deep conversations with the right people are priceless, and ideas are formed in the crucible of authentic, connected, and sometimes controversial conversations. No ideas are off the table because why would they be? Join us on Inquisitive Souls as we lead with curiosity, empathy, and a massive heaping of juvenile humor. Join us on this learning journey. You know, one of the things that's interesting about parenting, and I'm sure every parent of a teenager has experienced this. So we have two daughters, one who's almost 15, very, very close, and one who's 13 and a half. And one of the ongoing challenges that parents face, like that we face, is, you know, as they become they continually become more sovereign and autonomous human beings. So while they're obviously living under our roof and there are rules to follow, at the same time, you know, they're becoming every single day, they're marching inexorably towards being an adult. And what's a fascinating thing to try to figure out is, you know, how much do you control? I mean, I guess the question is more like, what's your parenting philosophy, right? So how much do you try to control what they do versus how much do you try to give them the information they need to make the choices they need to make, and then let them make those choices and deal with the consequences in an age-appropriate way? I mean, for example, but figuring out what's age-appropriate, I think, is always a challenge. So and that's something that we deal with pretty much every day, because especially more so Chloe, our almost 15-year-old, she's in high school, she's in grade 10, she's wanting to do more things, and it's really interesting how, you know, I mean, there's such a wide gamut of things to think about, like whether it's, you know, I mean, obviously drugs and alcohol and relationships and social media and how much time we want her home versus how much time she can be at her friends and schoolwork and all that kind of stuff. And it's, you know, because she's entering the age now where if it was totally up to her, she'd be spending all her time with her friends, which I totally remember that. And I think, like, for me, it's so easy. I see so many similarities in her and I when I was the same age, and, you know, except for the fact that she's her head screwed on way better and has a much more clear set of values that she believes in. So, which is great, you know, and that's a big contributing factor to it too, because it's like this kid is, you know, has shown so far that she's trustworthy, and that she, you know, makes good choices, for a 15-year-old. And so, but at the same time, she is constantly bumping up against these boundaries. And it's funny because I think as parents, like, she thinks we're super strict, and I don't want to make, you know, sweeping generalizations, but from what I see from her circle of friends, we do seem to be fairly strict as it relates to, you know, I don't think we're strict at all, but I mean, I guess that's I can certainly understand the dichotomy of opinion there. But so what we see as reasonable, you know, she sees as very constrictive and all that kind of stuff. However, what we've also done, but I think we try to compromise as well. Like, so for example, you know, she would rather be out with her friends and have family dinner. So at this age, you know, what we've done is we've set up some nights where, you know, it's kind of sacred, where we will have family dinners like Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, and then we can be more flexible on the other days. So if she wants to go do something with her friends or whatever, and, you know, I feel we used to eat dinner together pretty much every night, but I don't know, we feel like that's a compromise. That as long as we don't need like an anchored down touch point, like set touch point every day, but we would like to have one a few times a week to complement, you know, all the other kind of touch points. So it's, you know, but we also have some, you know, pretty clear rules about, you know, when you're allowed to be out, you know, that we need to know your friends. And if we don't know your friends, like to a level where we feel comfortable, then you're not fucking going out. You're not walking around out after dark, you know, which is something very different from what a lot of her friends do. But at the same time, you know, I don't want to get, even when you see a kid doing something that you think is like, oh my God, this is such a mistake or whatever, if they don't want to hear the message, it's really hard to get it across. And I just, as a parent, I don't feel like it's in my best interest or her best interest to try everything I can do to possibly make her see the light. I think what we can do is we can offer our help. We can offer, like, I like to share my own stories with them, as honestly, so they have the information they need to make informed choices. And then but I really feel like what will serve them better in the long term is giving them the ability to make choices, and then, and helping them understand the potential implications of those choices, and then letting them make them. So for example, like, we don't tell her not to drink or not to do drugs or any of those things. We just let her know that, like, if you get drunk, here's some of the things that can, like, if you decide to go out and get completely shit-faced, here's some of the things that could happen. Your friends could videotape some whatever is going down, and it'll be on social media forever. Like, that shit never goes away. You could find yourself in a compromising position with a guy that you don't know. Or anybody that you don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to be a guy, a group of people you don't know. And all those things have potentially very serious implications. But ultimately, if she decides to go out and do that, like, I'm not going to set up her life in order to prevent her from ever doing that, because I just think that will backfire. That's kind of what my parents did to me a little bit. Like, not set up, they didn't restrict me like that, but the message was always, don't drink. And I mean, for me, I'm not blaming them or anything, but I mean, for me, the first thing I wanted to do was go drink. But what's interesting about it is that she doesn't want to do that. And I'm not, you can never be sure how obviously our teaching and our attitude about it has played a role in that, but she's also her own person. And so her own set of, values and beliefs and what she thinks is right and wrong and all that is also playing a significant role and so it's, I don't know, I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say, but what happens is, we have to have a lot of discussions about this on an ongoing basis, like with Tanya and me, and, less so Chloe, because she's a teenager and thinks her parents are dorks and doesn't really, I wouldn't say she doesn't want to talk to us. Yeah, she's probably at the point right now where she doesn't want to talk to us too much, but it's an ongoing dialogue, right? And so, but I do, and so another thing to consider is that Tanya and I have very different parenting styles, and they complement each other in some ways, but it also creates some challenges in some ways. So, for example, Tanya's a much more detail-oriented person, and I'm much more of a big picture type of person. Like, so if I feel like things are generally headed in the right direction, I'm good with that. Where Tanya likes to really focus on the details and make sure that the right direction things are moving in the right direction. Because the details are being taken care of. And so there's pros and cons to both of those. And they complement, like I said, we complement one another, but it also creates some challenges where we think about handling different situations differently. Like, I'm much more laissez-faire, I would say. And so I find some of the things that she thinks are important, sometimes I can find them tedious, And so that also creates the opportunity for a lot of ongoing discussion. Like, how do you resolve that? How do you know when to compromise and what's important not to compromise about? And how do you merge these two different parenting philosophies? And what happens when you butt heads or you don't agree on how to handle an issue? And as a kid gets older, when kids are young, it's very important to, say 6, 7, 8 or whatever, it's very important to present a united front as parents. And while it's still important to do that when they're older, it's also important to, what's the best way to put this? They get more and more, they get better and better at articulating their arguments and defending, like, their own point of view. And so for me, like, if there's something going on, Tanya and Chloe are having a disagreement about something, I don't just automatically take Chloe's side or take Tanya's side, I don't automatically take Tanya's side, because I can see both points of view. And oftentimes, it's a compromise needs to happen. So but what are the things you need to present a united front on about? When are the opportunities to teach everybody, for everybody to learn together about how to compromise and how to talk through an issue and to respect everybody's point of view and all of those things. And man, it is an absolutely fascinating journey. And one thing that I'm really sure of, I think one of the reasons that I don't really get overly worked up about it is because I remember from my own experience that, you know what, my parents instilled the right values in me. It took me a long fucking time to start realizing that and to start living those values. But one of the reasons I'm doing that is because they instilled them. And my dad was always kind of, we had a similar, my parents had a similar relationship where my dad was very laissez-faire and said, you know what, they'll figure it out and they'll come out of it when they're 20, in their 20s. And that's what happened. But at the same time, my mom tried really hard to keep us on the straight and narrow. And, we caused her a lot of angst and frustration, for sure. So, I guess I'm not really sure what the point of this podcast was. It was just me talking through some of the very interesting challenges with parenting teenagers. And, I feel like we're doing a reasonably good job. Some days are better than others. And, I think one of the things that really makes a huge difference too is the emotional validation, right? Like, so being able to, empathize, practice empathy, being able to, operating with those core assumptions, like the things people do and say make sense to them. So try to understand why. Like, a teenager says so much shit that, on the face of it makes absolutely no sense, but it does make sense to her, obviously. So try to find out why. There's no single truth. Take a benign interpretation, right? So when she does some stupid shit, don't automatically just ascribe, malicious motives to it. Look for a more benign interpretation, and then use that interpretation, like use the connection that comes from taking that interpretation to create some dialogue and conversation. So, I think that's something that's working really well, but I really spend a lot of time trying to really empathize with her and really, really try to see the world through her eyes. And it makes a big difference. So anyways, that's just a little ramble about parenting teenagers. I love your feedback. And, it's an interesting journey, and who knows where it will end up. And we'll see you next time. We got some great episodes of the podcast coming up. Thanks for listening to the Emotionally Excellent Man Show. Now, go own your shit like the powerful, handsome boss man that you are.